So good evening all. Welcome again for the Hallmark Academy, and today we have Dr. Jindal sir, who requires no introduction because he's been a teacher to a lot of eminent chest physicians in the country, and he has been distinguished as a medical teacher and a clinician who headed the department in Postgraduate Medical Institute of Medical Education and Research in Chandigarh from 1988 to 2014, and he has also recognized the institute in WHO for collaborating the Center for Research and Capacity of Building in Chronic Respiratory Disease in 2003 to 2009. So without wasting more, I think sir has been known for a lot, and we don't have much time. I think sir, I would give you the more time, I think, because I think the session is more on learnings, and I would want sir to speak on.
Well, thank you very much, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today, it's my pleasure to talk about cough. Sorry. Cough is a very distressing and annoying symptom, as all of us know, and it is not only disturbing or a nuisance kind of symptom in the presence of others in the meetings, but also sometimes very risky. You see, it can cause multiple complications, especially when there are a lot of comorbidities, as you can see here. Patients of asthma, COPD, etc. There is a risk of pneumothorax and many other complications. Then there is a cough may cause very high increase in the intracavitary pressures in the abdominal cavity, in the thoracic cavity, and often in the intracranial cavity. You see, so frequently it is a cause of syncopal attacks. A lot of other comorbidities like diabetes, hypertension, cardiac problems, also when they have accompanying cough, I think it is a very disturbing symptom. You see, the question we are going to address today is, could your chronic cough be asthma? I think that is a very important issue which one needs to discuss, and which is one of the commonest problem one faces in clinical practice. The learning objectives of this session, of course, are to make a case for individualizing therapy in the management of cough in asthma via a case-based discussion. So I'm going to show you a case, and I'm sure most of you can identify the case and its problems. You see, here is the story of a 38-year-old male office executive who visited the clinic complaining of persistent cough and difficulty in breathing. He had a history of chronic cough for more than 10 years. His cough was dry with frequent exacerbations characterized with mucoid or mucopurulent expectoration. He was not responding to routine cough syrups for more than a week, had no complaints of fever, rhinorrhea, or sore throat. There was significant breathlessness during the episodes of exacerbations, which markedly disturbed his routine of his work and sleep at night. So obviously here it's a very disturbing symptom which is present for many years, almost 10 years, you see, and causes a lot of problems in his daily work. Before I go into this case, I like to discuss the causes of cough, because the differential diagnosis of cough can frequently be a challenge. You see, and most importantly, it is better to divide cough into acute cough, which is generally characterized as cough of less than 3-week duration, and subacute or chronic cough. While acute cough, of course, commonly is due to upper respiratory catarrh, acute bronchitis, and even asthma, pneumonias, acute exacerbations of COPD. Sometimes foreign bodies, especially in children, in elderly people, tumors, and people with cardiac disease. The left ventricle failure is also an important cause of cough. And we also know that a lot of drugs, especially the antihypertensive drugs, can cause cough. Of course, our patient here today had chronic cough, you see. So when it is chronic, again, one can divide into dry and productive cough. The common causes of dry cough, again, one is, of course, postnasal drip in patients with the rhinorrhea and nasal allergies. in patients with asthma, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and another important cause nowadays being identified is interstitial lung disease. Gastroesophageal reflux is also an important cause of cough, which must be identified. Sometimes there are benign tumors or kind of tumors with the low malignancy grade, you see, so they can also cause cough lasting for several months or sometimes years. Productive cough, of course, the most important causes, especially in this country, are bronchiectasis or presence of cavities and abscesses in the lung. For example, patients with allergic bronchopulmonary aspergillosis and other conditions, you see. I think so once we can diagnose these or at least suspect clinically whether it is productive or dry, one can make a kind of diagnosis in one's mind, you see. Because if it is dry and productive and seasonal cough, then the chances are that it could be bronchial asthma or chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, chronic bronchitis, etc. On the other hand, copious foul-smelling sputum along with the hemoptysis in bronchiectasis or sometimes tuberculosis and fungal infections, as I've said. Non-productive cough can also be due to interstitial lung disease and non-productive cough accompanied with hemoptysis, especially in the elderly, especially in smokers, and when it is progressive, not getting relieved with any of the drugs, then one again should suspect tumors and so on. So if we really analyze on this, on these clues, our patient, I think the medical history, the important points had been that he has been having chronic cough for more than 10 years, which obviously means he had chronic cough. And there was no significant medical history, other histories like presence of any bronchiectasis or tuberculosis or diabetes or other things, you see. So that important history is important. And the personal history, the important symptoms or the points being that he was an office executive, he was married and had 2 children, he had been a non-smoker and a non-alcoholic. This is an important history to rule in and to rule out certain diagnoses. For example, he is a non-smoker, so I think we can, with some confidence, we can exclude the diagnosis of COPD and other smoking-related diseases, although not totally at this stage. His mother had similar symptoms in the past, but the details are unknown. I think that family history is also useful in making our diagnosis, such as asthma, for example, which I think is our subject for the day. With this history, he was clinically examined and some laboratory assessments were done. The physical examination was generally normal, height 167 centimeters, weight 68 kg, the BMI also normal 24.4, temperature of 37 degrees Celsius, so normal, you see. The vital signs like pulse, respiratory rate and blood pressure were generally normal, though the respiratory rate was high, you see, 30 breaths per minute. Systemic examination, like for the heart and abdominal examinations were normal. However, the chest examination showed diffuse and bilateral rhonchi on lung auscultation. Otherwise, there were no focal lung signs. Laboratory examination, routine hematology, routine biochemistry, and ECG were normal. So he was subjected to other important investigations like pulmonary function test and chest radiography. At this stage, we know that this person was likely to have at least a chronic lung disease, you see, which is not kind of associated with any significant comorbidity. The pulmonary function test showed the FE1 over FVC ratio of 55% predicted, which means there was moderate degree of airway obstruction. moderate to significantly, I mean it's clinically significant, although from pulmonary function point of view, we can say it as a moderate severe. Chest radiography also was largely normal. There was mild hyperinflation. However, there were no infiltrates, no bullae, and no pneumothorax, etc., which are important to exclude in such patients. So the diagnosis is obvious, that it is a chronic bronchial asthma with acute flare-up and associated with chronic cough. I think that is that there is no, we can also say that there is no bronchopneumonia or no other complication which can be seen with such a patients like pneumothorax, etc. So before we come to the management of cough in this patient, you see, I like to talk about asthma a little bit. Asthma is a very common and highly prevalent disease globally, all over the world, and in this country as well. You see. As you can see from this figure, this was done under the auspices of Indian Council of Medical Research, that when asthma prevalence in adults was examined at 16 different centers in the country, and you can see here that asthma was seen in 3.5% on an average. Of course, there was variations from 2% to 16% in different parts of the country. This is the Indian INSERT study. Globally also, a similarly variable ratio has been reported, 1 to 21% in adults. And in children, of course, the incidence is high, or the prevalence is high. It is around 20% or so. Asthma is a chronic inflammatory disease, and it's a very important global health issue, which we all understand, and it is an important cause of chronic non-communicable diseases. Chronic cough in asthma patients, there have been different studies, and as you can see in this figure, that this is a major symptom associated with asthma, and it could be present in about 39 to 40% in asthmatic non-smoker patients, while in asthmatic smokers, the prevalence is even more, 42% or up to 45% and so. So smokers had have a little higher chance of having cough, but although they are generally similar, almost 40% of asthma patients have chronic cough. What are the triggering factors for cough in asthma? Patient of asthma can come to the clinic, to the physician, whenever he or she is exposed to cold air, for that matter, especially at the onset of winters. Fatigue and stress, mental stress as well, or physical stress, both can cause or precipitate cough. Presence of smoke, and sometimes in presence of fragrance, you see, walking in the garden, and of course the paints, the vapors of other things, they can also cause cough. Presence of pollen grains in the environment is an important cause of cough, because a lot of pollens are allergic in their action, you see. And cough worsens in specific seasons more frequently in asthmatic coughers compared with non-asthmatic coughers. I think everybody gets cough whenever there is a change of season, for example, September or October, you see. But the chances of having such cough are much more in patients with asthma. So how to really go? I'll come to this slide in a little later, you see. I'm sorry that you cannot see it properly in this, but we'll discuss the approach to the patient in a little while, you see, at the end. Now, coming to management of asthma in general, you see, most of you would have heard about GINA. GINA is the global initiative for management of asthma. And this is the very kind of popular picture, cartoon from the GINA guidelines, that there are three important circles. One, that you should assess the patient, adjust the treatment, and then review the response, and again assess. So this circle kind of goes on, you see. Assessment, for example, for diagnosis, symptoms control, and risk factors should be assessed. Lung function should be assessed. Inhaler technique should be assessed later on, and the adherence to the inhalation therapy and patient's preference for treatment, that should be assessed, you see. So once you have assessed all these things, then you should start treatment and adjust the treatment. You see, if patient is already on treatment, then you have to look into the compliance issues and other things. You see, medication, for example, whether patient is really taking it properly or not. You see, and whether there are any modifiable risk factors or no. So, and thereafter you review the response with the help of, again, reduction in symptoms, reduction in number of exacerbations, any presence of side effects, patient's satisfaction, and improvement in lung functions, you see. So depending upon the response, you reassess the patient. If need be, you readjust the treatment. So this circle goes on and on until patient is appropriately managed, you see. So coming to treatment of asthma, just briefly, brief introduction, that there are pharmacological options and then there are non-pharmacological options. Both have to be, of course, undertaken in all patients, you see. And this is the general guideline. In the past, in fact, for example, asthma was commonly divided into mild intermittent asthma, mild persistent asthma, moderate persistent asthma, and severe persistent asthma. Mild persistent asthma, or intermittent asthma, that this is quite common, that one gets off and on attacks, especially during change of season, or whenever there is some stress, physical or mental, you see, or any other triggering factor is present. Generally, these patients are treated only with the short-acting beta agonist like salbutamol and terbutaline. If it is mild persistent asthma, then one adds low-dose inhaled corticosteroids. But if it is moderate persistent asthma, then one has to select more drugs like low-dose inhaled corticosteroids plus long-acting beta agonist like salmeterol and formoterol. And depending upon the response, if response is not adequate, then you use higher dose inhaled corticosteroids. Sometimes one need to use low-dose inhaled corticosteroid plus leukotriene receptor antagonists like montelukast and zofirlukast, or oral bronchodilators like theophylline can be added to low-dose inhaled corticosteroid. And if it is severe and persistent asthma, of course, multiple drugs are generally required, high-dose inhaled corticosteroids and other drugs like long-acting beta agonist, leukotriene receptor antagonist, oral theophylline, etc., etc. And if it is very severe attack, then we add oral corticosteroids if control is still not achieved, you see. Sometimes you see the GINA guidelines are available globally. A need was felt by Indian chest physicians to frame guidelines for India, because there are some differences in the patient population in India than, or not only in patient population but also in the availability of pharmaceuticals and other things, you see. So these were the guidelines. I'll just briefly show that these were the guidelines which are achieved or which were framed by the Indian Chest Society, National College of Chest Physicians, etc., along with the PGI Chandigarh. And by and large, they have been based on the same kind of principles, that stepwise approach. Step one, I think at this stage I may also like to say that these drugs for asthma are classified as controllers, which are required for immediate use, and then of course there are the relievers, you see, the reliever medications which is for immediate relief, and the controllers which are required for long-term maintenance therapy, like inhaled corticosteroids and other drugs which I have just mentioned earlier. Nowadays, of course, we have a lot of new treatment options, the novel therapies. I will not go into these details because generally these are required for severe or resistant asthma, the anti-IgE monoclonal antibodies like omalizumab and so on. So I think these are the novel therapies which are becoming available for a very select subpopulation of patients. Non-pharmacological therapies are very important because they, for example, smoking cessation. If a patient is smoker, smoking cessation has a positive effect on overall health. Then self-management plans should be introduced, you see, like regular follow-ups and advice from the doctor, and associated with the reduced hospital visits, you see, because patients should be encouraged when to increase or go from step 1 to step 2. The physical exercise like physical training, breathing, retraining, etc., that is also important because it causes reduction in symptoms and medication withdrawal. Allergen avoidance should be done because it causes reduction in symptoms, especially in infants and children, whenever is feasible. Unfortunately, this is generally not feasible in adults who have lot of outdoor activity in that sense, you see. So it becomes difficult to be confined at home. Immunotherapy, of course, is another option. We will not, of course, discuss at this stage, you see. Now, this was about asthma in general, very briefly, you see, which I had said. Now, as far as chronic cough is concerned, I think that is the algorithm which is very popular again all over the world and very useful. Whenever a patient comes with chronic cough, one needs to evaluate with history, examination, and chest X-ray. This is almost must in every patient. And if it is associated with the smoking or ACE inhibitors, you see, angiotensin converting enzyme inhibition, then you discontinue the therapy. Most chances are that patient will improve. On the other hand, when on history and physics, if you go to the left side of the algorithm, you will see the cause of cough is suggested on history examination and chest X-ray. Then one has to investigate and treat it accordingly, you see. This central kind of upper box shows the common causes which can be investigated and treated, like upper airway obstruction, upper airway cough syndrome, which of course is treated empirically, or asthma, which is an important cause. We need to identify asthma with the help of spirometry and bronchodilator reversibility and treat it accordingly, you see. Then there can be other causes of cough like non-asthmatic eosinophilic bronchitis, gastroesophageal reflux, etc. I will not go into details of those causes at present. So if the treatment is initiated accordingly for this, and if the if the response is inadequate to the optimum treatment, you see, then you go to the second box, you see, downwards, and consider the other therapies, consider the other investigations first, like 24-hour esophagogram, pH monitoring, endoscopic or video fluoroscopic swallowing reflux evaluation. These are mostly done for GE reflux, which is nowadays a commonly identifiable cause of cough. Chronic sinusitis is an important cause of cough. For this we need sinus imaging. I had talked about interstitial lung disease earlier. High resolution CT scan is required for these patients. Similarly, for other lung causes, you see, or endobronchial causes, not only the CT scan but also bronchoscopy may be required. Echocardiography may be required to exclude the cardiac cause, and then general environmental assessment and rare causes are also important. So each diagnosis, once you really reach the diagnosis closely, you should optimize therapy for that diagnosis. Check the compliance, because that's a very important factor in the treatment. And sometimes multiple causes can be present in one particular patient. In fact, in one of the study, there were more than 2 or 3 causes of cough in a single patient in more than 50% of patients. So this is, of course, the initial treatment, which we'll discuss as we come to the case. Now, how to treat cough in patients with asthma? One important thing is, of course, the bronchodilators like short-acting beta-2 agonists or theophylline. Inhaled corticosteroids is the other important therapy, and it is almost the cornerstone therapy for asthma. Long-acting beta-2 agonists are also required, as I have shown the steps in the management of asthma, and these are the mostly the drugs which will control cough in asthmatics. The leukotriene receptor antagonists are also important in the treatment of cough in asthma. Cough formulations for managing cough in asthma. I have already discussed the management of asthma in general. That is mostly based on use of bronchodilators and anti-inflammatory drugs, as you can see, which I had shown you briefly earlier. However, patient is most distressed with cough. And especially the Indian mind, you can see that they're more concerned with immediate relief. So bronchodilatory cough formulations, I think, are very important for these patients for treatment. Commonly, there are 3 types of drugs which are included in the cough formulations, like mucolytics, bronchodilators, and expectorants. Mucolytic, like Ambroxol. What does it do? Ambroxol is a mucolytic agent, so it liquefies thick, viscous mucus. This is an important cause of non-responsive cough. So once it is kind of liquefied, the sputum can be easily coughed out, expectorated. So patient becomes easier. It is a common symptom with these patients who complain that something is sticking in their throat or in the chest. They also increase the antibiotic penetration in the purulent mucus. So the mucolytics are important. Bronchodilators like levosalbutamol, what does it do? It also helps dilatation of airways and thus help in expulsion of mucus, improve the mucociliary clearance of or the ciliary beat frequency. I think that is a very important action which we commonly ignore or do not remember. That they not only cause bronchodilation, the bronchodilators, but they also improve the mucociliary clearance, so that patient can kind of cough out the secretions from the bronchial tree. And there is some anti-inflammatory action as well attributed to levosalbutamol or salbutamol. Although the bronchodilators largely, the anti-inflammatory action is mostly done by corticosteroids, but some anti-inflammatory action is also attributed to these drugs. Almost similar action is expected from the expectorants, guaifenesin, like it helps in expulsion of mucus. So all these 3 kind of drugs in the cough formulations, their main objective is to dilate the bronchi, liquefy the thick sputum or the mucus, and expel it out. The management of asthma becomes a lot easier once the bronchial tree becomes clear of these solutions. These are the benefits of bronchodilatory cough formulations which contain levosalbutamol, and you can see here this study which shows you the Fissman cough severity score at first week follow-up visits for chronic and acute cough cases. The Fissman severity score is based on the kind of both on the severity of cough as well as the number of coughs after a particular period, you see. So you can see here that the before and after, in the orange you can see that there is significant improvement here, you see. And similarly in acute cough, after use of salbutamol or levosalbutamol, there is significant improvement. So bronchodilatory cough formulations such as those containing ambroxol, levosalbutamol and guaifenesin are essential to provide symptomatic relief in patients with asthma. This is not to say that the standard therapy for asthma is to be ignored with inhaled corticosteroids and bronchodilators, but it becomes a whole lot easier if patient's bronchial tree is clear. You see. So what was done in the index case which I had shown earlier? You see. The patient was admitted to the emergency department. He was administered IV hydrocortisone because there was very severe distressing symptoms and he had worsened. He was also prescribed a combination of levosalbutamol, ambroxol and guaifenesin syrup for cough. And within 24 hours, almost next day I think, he was discharged and advised to continue oral prednisolone, which is standard 30 milligram daily for 5 days. And he was advised regular maintenance treatment with corticosteroids and formoterol inhalation twice daily, which is, as I said earlier, is the cornerstone of asthma therapy, you see. There was significant improvement in cough after 2 days, and at week 4 and 8 follow-up visits, his symptoms of cough and asthma had gradually improved. After about 6 months of maintenance treatment, he could be stepped down on treatment schedule as per standard treatment guidelines, which I have shown earlier, both the GINA guidelines as well as the Indian guidelines. And he did not require regular inhaled corticosteroids and formoterol any longer after 6 months, you see. This depends upon, of course, severity of asthma. Some patients may require for longer periods, but this patient, of course, didn't have that kind of severity. And he continued to do well for about another 6 months of follow-up visits, you see. So the key messages of today's talk is that the cough is a major symptom, chronic cough in particular, is a major symptom associated with asthma. With a prevalence of about 39% in asthmatic non-smokers and 42% in asthmatic smokers. Bronchodilators such as short-acting beta-2 agonists or theophylline, inhaled corticosteroids, long-acting beta-2 agonists, and leukotriene receptor antagonists are used in the treatment of cough in asthma. Bronchodilator cough formulations such as those containing ambroxol, levosalbutamol and guaifenesin are essential to provide symptomatic relief of cough in patients with underlying respiratory condition. So these are used, of course, on short-term basis, although the bronchodilators will be required, of course, on relatively longer basis. Well, with this, I think I must also say that this presentation is only for updation, and this is entirely my own kind of views and analysis. Thank you very much for your patient listening. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your. Actually, there were very important points. What I feel is nowadays history taking is one of the thing, because major of the time the history when you take, the patient doesn't give a proper history. You have to pinpoint and ask the history in proper way. So I think that becomes a very important point. So there are some questions which we have got from Dr. Nilesh Kumar.
Yes.
He asked that how long SABA should be prescribed in mild intermittent asthma and mild persistent asthma.
Actually, SABAs are generally given for shorter periods, you see, and they are for SOS relief. So for mild intermittent asthma, usually you would require only for 24 hours or 48 hours alone. But sometimes, for example, if it is the cough is lasting, you see, then you can use for a few days, and that is oral, kind of along with other drugs, you see, like like the leukotrienes and ambroxol, etc. The cough syrups are generally required for 7 to 10 days in such patients, but otherwise inhalation therapy is generally only for a few days. It should not be prolonged, you see.
Prolonged, right, sir?
Yeah, I think that is.
Yes, sir. So then we have Dr. Harish Marchandani. His question is that is asthma related to chronic cough?
Yes, as I said that asthma is related in that sense. Chronic cough is a very frequent symptom of asthma, because in asthma we have a lot of pathophysiological factors like the bronchial irritation. There are also kind of a lot of inflammatory the enzymes, you see, or you can say the cytokines are liberated. You see, all these causes irritate the receptors in the mucosa. So there are irritant receptors, and then the others, they cause a lot of irritative cough, and then same is aggravated by bronchospasm, you see, because the bronchial tree muscles are also narrowed. So, and third important component in asthma is generally the mucus, you see. So these are 3-4 components which are responsible for cough. So they are mutually related to each other. Asthma causes chronic cough, and again the cough is caused by asthma or related to asthma. So that's what it is.
So hyperresponsiveness.
Yeah, that is what is basically the bronchospasm, the twitching which occurs.
And that is the reason bronchodilators become.
Yes, sure.
So then we have a question from Dr. Sumit who asks why asthma is more common in rainy season.
Well, the asthma is an allergic disorder, you see. So most of the time there is a change of environment, you see, during these seasons. So I would say that especially, for example, in July, August in India, so during this season there's a lot of growth of grasses and trees, you see. So they produce a lot of the pollens are there in the atmosphere. Although the rain tends to precipitate, but following the rains again there would be very rapid growth of grass, you see. So that is what causes a lot of problem in this patient. But sometimes it is individualized problem, you see. Some patients get worse afterwards, you see, or even during summer season sometimes some patients get worse.
Yes, sir. So there is one more question I have from my side as comorbidity of asthma and diabetes, because both of them can happen a lot of times. So how it's going to be a little difficult in those patients too?
Yes, the comorbidity in asthma as such may not be caused by diabetes, yes, but the two are present together and frequently, because both are common diseases, you see. And there are problems in management, because especially in acute conditions. One is for example, we know that the steroids cause worsening of diabetes, you see. So even inhaled corticosteroids sometimes, especially in patients with borderline or kind of in poorly controlled diabetics, you see, they can cause problems, you see. So, but in acute conditions it is even worse. You cannot use oral corticosteroids, you see, or even if you have to use it, then you have to use with great caution so that it doesn't precipitate diabetes. On the other hand, also there is an increased chance of infection in these patients, you see, because sometimes we are using corticosteroids. Diabetics are prone to infections, and including tuberculosis, you see. If patient is on inhaled corticosteroids, on oral corticosteroids, it is even more chances, you see. So one has to be very careful. You have to manage both the conditions together, you see.
So then we have a question from Dr. Gurmeet who talks about that treatment of resistant dry cough.
Yes, the resistant dry cough, most importantly, of course, you have to look into the cause, you see. Because if you have to treat the cause, you cannot only treat symptomatically, that is true. I mean, resistant means, I think it is a relative term, because resistance, sometimes the patients, especially those with interstitial lung disease, they are the worst patients to be treated with any drug. They do not respond to most of the drugs. But I suppose that is an issue which we have to address while addressing the treatment of specific conditions, you see, because you cannot treat resistant cough without treating the underlying cause, you see. So if it is a tumor for that matter, or if there is a cavity in the lung, then you have to treat it properly. Sometimes even surgical options may be required. And interstitial lung disease, of course, there are multiple therapies. I will not go into those details at this stage, you see. But
so then we have question from Pankaj Sharma, who talks about that oral or inhaled steroid. What is your choice? As
I think there is no dilemma about that. As far as maintenance therapy is concerned, you have to use inhaled corticosteroids. See, oral corticosteroids are required only for shorter periods, you see, for 5, 7, maximum 10 days, you see, for acute worsening. So that is the indication for oral corticosteroids, I would say.
Yes, sir. So I think then we have Dr. Segal from South Delhi, who asked which medication is effective in allergic asthma in children.
I think by and large it's the same management that with the
as you have already spoken.
with the kind of beta agonist and inhaled corticosteroids. One is afraid to use inhaled corticosteroids in children, but I think if the child is having chronic symptoms, it has to be used. So there is, by and large, the treatment remains the same with the drugs. Of course, as well as other like leukotriene receptor antagonists are more frequently used in children, and sometimes they're more helpful. Otherwise, in children of less than 5 years age, we are kind of hesitant to use long-acting beta agonists, you see. So only inhaled corticosteroids or short-acting beta agonists. Sometimes nebulization therapy may be required in children, etc.
So the next question is about nebulization only. That how long can we use nebulization in asthma? 2 to 3 times, 2 to 3 years in patient.
2 to 3 years age.
Yeah, age.
Yeah, I think nebulization can be safely used. It can be used for longer periods. Of course, one has to be careful that it doesn't cause kind of complications, because especially in children, the oral complications can be a problem. But and generally, I don't think it is required for longer periods. For a few days, it is okay. You see, in asthma, you don't have to give it on maintenance basis, you see, because children can do very well with nebulization, with spacers, you see, inhalation therapy with spacers, so that is almost equally effective. So.
Yes, sir. And I think a proper oral hygiene.
Yeah, sure, it has to be, of course, all those steps with the nebulization have to be taken care of. Yes.
So then we have this question regarding the side effect of levosalbutamol, that some patients do feel tremors.
Yet, I think tremors is a very common,
with
salbutamol it is a common symptom. It is a little less common with the levosalbutamol, that's what is generally said. But if you have to use it, then perhaps, generally they say also people become conditioned to the drug, you see, so, but it can happen.
Yeah, it can happen. You have to look at the benefit and the risk. Right, sir. So then we have hydrocortisone high dose, or dose of acute asthma. So what can be the high dose of hydrocortisone?
Well, it depends. I mean, how acute is. Normally, most of these patients would respond to 100 to 200 milligrams intravenous, or sometimes even oral is good enough, you see, for first 24 hours. But sometimes it is very fatal asthma, so bolus can be given, you see, when people have given up to 500 milligrams, you see, intravenously. 1 or 2 boluses, that's what is generally said. But I think it's not commonly required.
So effectiveness is more important than the dosing as part. Then we have Dr. Ramdas. He has this question of which patient uses use of steroid in asthma. Which patient use of steroid in asthma? I think what he wants to ask is that where should we use steroids? In which kind of category?
Well, as I said earlier, inhaled corticosteroids is the cornerstone of asthma management as far as maintenance treatment is concerned, you see. So, all patients with more than mild symptoms require this. In fact, now there is a recommendation that even patients with mild asthma, they would do well, and one should try to use that because it avoids exacerbations. So that
Yeah,
I think
even in the corticosteroids, they
Yeah.
increase the beta receptors
yes. So
and
yeah,
helps
so
in asthma management.
in asthma. So I think it is fair to use in all patients, inhaled one, you see.
Yeah, inhaled
Yeah.
corticosteroids. So now how to treat the chronic cough? Again, this question comes again and again. Sir has spoken about the bigger module which we have already shown on the PowerPoint. So it is, I think, sir, if you can just talk about that, it's always the clinician's perception. How do we go about? So I think.
Well, I will say that if a patient is there with chronic cough, one should treat the symptom as well and identify the cause, you see. I think once you identify the cause, then you have to treat that cause as well, you see. So both have to start simultaneously, but it depends upon what type of patient you face and how is the response, you see. But both have to be treated, but one should not ignore symptomatic treatment, you see. If a patient is responding well, gets well with the inhaled treatment only, then it's okay. But many of these patients may require for few days, you see, the symptomatic therapy as well, you see.
Yes, sir. So thank you very much, sir, for your time and your knowledge. I think we are very blessed to have sir who interacted with us, as also he has answered the questions. Now I would ask the main person who has executed this program. We have Mr. Shailendra, who will give the word of thanks.
Okay.
So thank you, Dr. Rohit, and thank you so much, sir. It was fantastic session. I think all the people who are connected at remote areas, remote places, they would have definitely benefited from this session. And yes, this is our fourth in the series, and it's our small effort in terms of bringing in quality education at your doorstep. I'm sure you are liking this. Please get in touch with us with your feedback, and we are from Wokhard Medical and Marketing. We all pay high regard and thank you for all your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Anything?
We have more questions coming up, but I know that we are going beyond time. I think it was a very good talk and people are appreciating that. When we get questions, we know that people are watching it.
Are we live?
Yeah.
So can we request if you don't mind?
Yeah, sure, I think.
So a few more questions, and I think we should stop. More queries, we can answer that on the forum itself.
Yes.
Then we have this question from Dr. S.K. Tripathi, who asked that how long can we use, again the same question we have, how long can we use the levosalbutamol?
I think I had answered this question earlier, that levosalbutamol is generally used for shorter periods or only for SOS use, and for long-term use you have to use long-term, kind of long-acting.
So what are the safe NSAIDs for asthma patients?
Safes and unsafes.
NSAIDs, the anti-inflammatory drugs.
Non-steroidal.
Okay, I think the safe NSAIDs, by and large all are safe, you see, but there are some patients, for example, in which aspirin and some even other drugs can cause worsening, you see. There is a special group of patients, but in a routine we don't, if it is needed, then we don't really avoid it, you see. And the common is aspirin, of course, which is required in a lot of people with comorbidities, especially as a kind of antiplatelet drug, you see. So if it is not causing problems, then we don't have to really avoid it, you see. But some patients may show kind of aggravated symptoms, you see. So in there, the alternative drugs have to be chosen. The others, there is no, I think, by and large, not much, but there is no real kind of contraindications to use those drugs, you see.
Okay. So after that we have a lot of thank yous saying from you, Dr. Vijay Shekhar. He's saying that it was very good and useful for our daily practice. So thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for addressing all the questions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir, and thank you everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.